the best in the world at engineering?
Well, from steam engines to jet engines, from the train to the hovercraft, the list of British inventions is second to none.
Look closely and you'll find that the British were behind almost every big advance that shaped the modern world.
In this series, some Premier League eggheads have steered me towards their favourite icons, which they feel best reflect our national engineering genius. My search for the best of British engineering has taken me the length and breadth of the country, and on my journey I've seen some pretty amazing stuff. But there's something about a bridge which is a bit special. These are among the biggest man-made structures in existence. And it's another branch of engineering in which Britain has led the world. So which ones have made it to our best of British list?
I've come to London to see its most famous symbol, probably the most distinctive and celebrated river crossing in the world, Tower Bridge.
This is the most fairy tale bridge in the world. It looks like two tall castles sitting on neighbouring islands. The handsome prince from one falls in love with the beautiful princess from the other, and his ugly engineer uncle designs the drawbridges to meet in the middle. Tower Bridge was the answer to an apparently intractable problem. How do you get the horses and carriages across the river while still letting your tall ships into the world's busiest port? The ingenious solution was a massive bascule or drawbridge done up in neo-Gothic to blend in with the Tower of London. When it was built in 1884, Tower Bridge was one of the engineering marvels of the world. No wonder the Americans wanted to buy it. First stop is the old control room, which sits on the South Pier.
Wow, look at this. What's this? Raise, lower. Wonder what that does. Now today we're going to witness a very special event. The bridge is going to be opened fully. Now, it happens very rarely nowadays, and they're doing this to let through a monster of a ship, a naval battleship, HMS Somerset. And all that's going to be done from the new control tower, which is a much more high-tech operation. And who's going to open the bridge? Move!
But before they'll let me get my sweaty hands on the controls, I've been told I need a crash course on how Tower Bridge works. So the bridge master, Eric Southers, is taking me into what looks like Jack the Ripper's wine cellar.
Where are you taking me, Eric? It's getting spooky!
This is our bascule chamber, Rory.
Eric, you brought me to the very bowels of the earth.
Not quite the bowels of the earth, Rory. We're just below the water level and
we're actually below
the river.
We're below the river now.
Just about, yes.
So where is the level of the river?
Halfway up that light there.
Good Lord. So if we go down these steps, we're actually walking into the river.
We are underwater, yes.
This is an amazing place, this. It's called the bascule chamber, is it?
This is the bascule chamber.
So what I'm looking at now is actually the underneath of the road.
We're underneath the road.
So this bit is the bit that comes down, the bit of the seesaw that comes down, yeah. So how far does it come down? Because we're standing in a very, very dangerous position, it strikes me.
If we did a full lift, it would come back just short of the wall.
Can you actually stand here when the bridge comes down?
You can do. And it will just about touch your shoulder as it stops.
And what weight are we talking about that has to move?
The bascule itself is 1,100 tonne.
1,100, that's heavier than me.
When Tower Bridge opens, this is the bit you never get to see. Down here you realise what a massive piece of engineering this is. It's like being inside a gigantic potato masher. And how did it work? Well, Tower Bridge went up in the age of the steam engine, so naturally the engineers made it a kind of cross between a bridge and a train.
Here we are in the engine room. Now what's happened so far is fires have heated up water to make steam. That steam has been used to pump water into accumulators, and the weight of which at the crucial moment we released to drive these pistons which drive these wheels, which as you can see have a pinion on them. These pinions attached to other pinions and other crankshafts, and eventually it all engages with the rack on the actual bridge bascule itself, forcing it down and the bridge up. You see? Simple. Very simple, in fact. Deceptively simple. I mean, you think it's going to be really complicated, but it actually turns out to be very simple indeed. Don't know why I didn't think of it myself.
Now Now for the fun bit, opening the bridge.
Right, we're stopping the road traffic now by shutting the traffic lights. Southwest road gate, please. Southwest road gate, Brian.
Stopping the traffic. We're stopping the traffic. We've now got to get rid of the public. How are we getting rid of the public, Charlie?
Well, the siren helps. We'll,
You must have got a rifle.
No, last resort rifle.
And then gates. Are the gates shutting?
Yes, we're just shutting the last.
Shutting the gates now, and the huge warship is approaching us. Now, how can I help you out here, Charlie? I want to be as much
I've
assistance
got a bit of a problem at the moment.
You're struggling with that gate.
Glenn, we've got a problem on the southwest gate.
Southwest gate. We just have to stand in the middle of the road. The southwest gate is jammed.
HMS Somerset, can you just ease up, please? Can you please ease up?
It's moving at some speed. We've asked it to slow down, please. Mr. McGrath is not ready yet. Gates are shut. It's a very, very exciting. It is very tense. Public are clear, I think, Charlie. A few odd stragglers, but who cares about them? That warship was moving at some speed around the corner, wasn't it?
A little bit discerning when you
It was indeed, yeah.
So what we've done now, we've unlocked the pulls, which is the main locking device.
Yes. Pulls are unlocked.
And now we're withdrawing the nose bolt.
That's the thing that holds the road together in the middle, isn't
That's
it?
right, and 4 steel pins.
Nose bolts retract. Okay, you can see it all happening on the screen.
Yes. Well, I want you to grab hold of this lever. When I tell you to do so, just pull the lever fully back. Once you've got it back, keep it back.
This is the most power I've ever had. Is that right?
Yeah, pull it back and away we go.
I am now opening Tower Bridge. Look at this. That's me. That is me doing that.
I've shipped about 2,000 tons of material there in one go.
I'm used to that. Right. It goes up quite quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, about 90 seconds from
This
ground.
is very exciting. I hope the Royal Navy appreciate what I'm doing.
I hope so too.
It's obviously seen who's operating the bridge and has decided to slow down a bit, yeah.
Right, we'll come to a stop there, please, Rory. Just relax.
Relax. Now, what's the etiquette about waving at the ships as they go past? Is that...
There's more chance of you waving to her than her waving to you.
I hope you notice how smooth that was. It's probably one of the smoothest bridge openings I've certainly ever officiated at. I wonder if they realise it was me who opened the bridge, that quirky, that individual style of mine. Now, do we salute this, or I think we're taking the next? Yes, it is him off the telly.
Now waving to somebody.
Yes, it was me. But now I'd like to show you how to close the bridge. Are we ready, Charlie?
We're ready?
Okay, what's this? Nothing's happened. Nothing's happened.
Look right.
Put another...
Right.
Oh, it is happening, yeah. We could have put another 20p in and see if that would help. This is wonderful. What power, what control I have. A bit slower going down, isn't it? I love the way it meets in the middle. I don't know why that should surprise me.
Stand by, bridge crew. About to open road gates. Traffic, please wait for a green signal before moving off.
Tower Bridge manages to pass itself off as a stone bridge, but it's not. It's really an iron bridge clad in stone, and that's the secret. Iron revolutionised bridge engineering, and guess what? It was us Brits what done it, as I'm about to discover as my arduous journey continues.
What's the best pub around here then? The New Inn, alright, make it.
Funny old things, rivers. The arteries of economic life since the earliest days of human civilization, and yet a complete pain to get across. When Isambard Kingdom Brunel and his chums decided to roll up their sleeves and build the modern world, high up on their to-do list was better bridges. To see how they did it, I've come to lovely Shropshire.
Now listen, have you got too much money? Would you like to get rid of some? Well, forget fast women and slow horses. Build a bridge. You will lose money. It's a cast iron certainty. It's certainly true of this cast iron bridge we're about to meet.
This bridge was built in the days when engineers were called ironmasters, and ironmasters were called things like Abraham Darby III. The Abraham Darby III of whom I speak was a very rich ironmaster and decided to blow his pile on the best bridge in the world.
And this is what Darby spent his money on. The biggest and most expensive Meccano set ever made.
The iron bridge in Coalbrookdale is all the more amazing when you realise when it was built. In 1777, it was fashionable for men to wear big white wigs. George III was still sensible, and Mozart had only just learned the piano. Up till then, bridges were made of stone. Nothing like this had ever been seen. It was like someone today building a house out of toothpaste. This was an engineering wonder, the world's very first iron bridge.
Our hero, Abraham III, had a reputation with boilers. He'd been making them for the newfangled steam engines that were powering the emerging Industrial Revolution.
Abraham turned from boilers to bridge building, not because they needed a bridge in Coalbrookdale, but because he thought it would be a fantastic advert for a rather clever invention of Abraham Darby I, a cheap way of making cast iron. In 1709, Darby I discovered that if you mix up some iron ore, manganese and limestone, shove it in an oven and heat it up to 1200 degrees centigrade, you get this really useful runny stuff called molten iron.
Wow, look at this.
Why was this so useful? Well, for centuries, if you needed something made of metal, you had to pop round to the local blacksmith who would hammer some hot chunk of the stuff roughly into shape. But with Darby's new method, you could pour liquid iron into moulds. This means you can quickly create elaborate shapes and reproduce them perfectly, again and again. Goodbye, blacksmith. Hello, the mass production of hundreds and thousands of identical metal parts.
Got good gloves on. They're not woolen, obviously.
Darby III realised that cast iron was going to change the world forever. But how could he prove it? Well, no one had ever considered building anything as daft as a metal bridge. So that's what Darby decided to do, across the River Severn, using 1,737 pieces of cast iron.
Now how about this? Just one of these supporting arches weighs an incredible 5¼ tons. That's heavy, that's 5 minis. That's 56 times heavier than me. Imagine that, 56 me's.
Darby took a chance building the bridge out of cast iron, but the shape of his bridge followed a tried and tested principle. To see what that was, I'm off to meet Claire Barrett, our series engineer.
Now, iron bridge in Coalbrookdale. Very different from a suspension bridge, very different from a cantilever. It's an arch.
It's perfectly simple and a very, very good bridge.
But why is an arch so strong? That's what I understand. They look very flimsy to me, and yet they're used all over the world in all times.
Flimsy, I think I prefer the word elegant.
Oh.
Should we just try and build this one?
So we're building iron bridge, only in pieces.
When you build an arch, you have to have a load of scaffolding underneath.
Right.
For iron bridge, they would have had masses of scaffolding in the middle, but we'll just use our hands here and the pair of us.
Now that was very simple.
So the arch just carries those horizontal and vertical forces all the way down to the foundations.
I see, and this presumably, am I right, is the principle of the dome? Something like
Yes.
And
Yes.
it comes from all.
Spin an arch in 360 degrees and you've got a dome. But
Right.
you can stand on that now.
Can I?
Go on.
Now this I don't believe. Can I just in case?
Okay, I'm here to catch you.
Okay, move away. Look at that. I would never have thought that would support all 12 stone 3 of me.
12 stone 3?
Shut up. Now I'm very careful to keep my weight vertical. I'm sure if I started moving around we might have problems.
Yeah, well, we haven't got much connecting this one, so...
Right, so presumably if a load came from the side, that would happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Very good.
So Claire thinks you need lots of scaffolding to build an arched bridge, but Darby was even cleverer than Claire. How do we know? Well, 8 years ago, in a Swedish museum buried under a pile of ABBA records and musty meatballs, they discovered a watercolour showing Darby's iron bridge under construction. And what do you know? No scaffolding. Just a funny kind of improvised crane. But can you trust a watercolourist? David DeHaan from the Iron Bridge Gorge Museum decided to find out for himself.
David, this is fantastic. What is it?
It's our half-size model of how we think the bridge was built. And it gives us 4 points where you could attach block and tackle, raise things from boats directly underneath it, and you could tilt this sort of goalpost thing over and do the next one.
So it was useful, you actually did learn how they did it by building the...
It's totally workable.
And you've got this brilliant half-size River Severn here built.
Half-size River Severn.
Half-size River Severn is a River 3.5, isn't it? Nearly.
Darby's bridge cost £6,000, which personally I think is pretty reasonable. but was enough in 1771 to push the ironmaster to the brink of financial ruin. But what a way to blow £6,000.
Here's a difficult question for you, Dave. If Abraham III were to come back here today, what do you think he'd think? Would he think, bloody hell, my bridge is still there?
I think he'd be very pleased about the bridge. I think he'd be sorry to see that the industry is gone. You know, that it's strange. It's become country.
All these yuppies.
But very proud that this is here.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
His advert still exists, like a great big poster.
Yes. AED was here.
Yeah.
Derby's legacy is more than Iron Bridge. Thanks to him, a new era had dawned. Engineers could now imagine building bridges spanning huge distances. They had the material, if only they could think of a revolutionary design to go with it. Hugh Thomas Telford.
The White Knight said to Alice, I heard him then, for I had just completed my design to keep the Menai Bridge from rust by boiling it in wine. Now, you may not have heard of the Menai Bridge, but in 1872 it was famous enough to feature in Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass. And if you look on the back of the new pound coin, you'll see it there too.
If Derby's Iron Bridge showed the world what could be done with cast iron, the revolutionary Menai Straits Bridge showed it a radically new way to build bridges. This is the first time anyone had tried to suspend a big road from towers using metal cable. A suspension bridge to you. The bold new design meant the bridge could span 177 metres of water, making it, in its day, the biggest bridge span in the world.
The bridge was the solution to a potentially fatal problem. Before 1826, if you wanted to catch the Irish ferry at Holyhead, you had to cross this stretch of tidal water, famous for its strong, fast and deadly currents. Thanks, Danny.
One stormy night in 1785, 55 passengers were stranded on a sandbar when their boat ran aground. When the tide turned, all but one of them drowned.
Everyone agreed the answer was a bridge. But how could one be built in such challenging conditions and across such a wide span? Well, in 1810, Thomas Telford became the fourth engineer in 25 years to rise to the challenge.
And what a challenge it was. For a start, Telford was a stonemason rather than an ironmaster. Then there were the straits themselves, which even at their narrowest point are 550 feet wide. And as if that wasn't enough, the Admiralty insisted that any bridge had to be at least 100 feet above the water so that their warships could sail beneath it. So how would Telford do it? Well, he naturally began by thinking of an arch. To find out more, I'm meeting local consulting engineer William Day.
Telford started off looking at his favourite structure. Bear in mind he started out as a mason, so the arch was a natural form to him. He wanted to build a cast iron arch here. In fact, it would have been a bridge too far. 500 feet would not have stood given the materials they had. It would have actually collapsed.
According to conventional engineering wisdom, it simply couldn't be done. But Telford was about to rewrite the rules. Very small suspension bridges, of course, had been built before from wood and rope. But would the same engineering logic work on a much bigger scale, using iron and stone? Telford built two huge supporting pylons. From these he hung two massive metal chains, each of them 590 feet long. Each chain had 935 pieces. Each chain weighed a hefty 23.5 tons. And it took 150 men with arms like Popeye to haul them into place using ropes and capstans.
Of course, this has changed a lot since Telford's day. And the traffic for a start would have been horse-drawn carriages in those days. These walkways wouldn't have been here, the walkway was in the middle. Rather dangerous place to be, I should imagine. And of course, this steel wasn't here then, this all comes from the 30s. Still a mighty piece of work though.
When the bridge opened in 1826, everyone was amazed and delighted. Everyone except Telford, who thought it might fall down.
Although it was a great success, this bridge was also something that left Telford with great concerns. He never slept well after building this bridge.
3 years after the Menai Straits Bridge opened, Telford was asked to judge a competition for an even bigger bridge to cross the Great Avon Gorge. Telford said it was impossible, but a young man called Isambard Kingdom Brunel proved him wrong.
Okay, I admit it, I'm biased. I was born and brought up in the West Country, so for me there is only one bridge. Here in Bristol, the Clifton Suspension Bridge.
Brunel wanted to build the biggest suspension bridge in the world, spanning the greatest distance. An elegant bridge that seemed almost to float across the sky. He borrowed Telford's idea but pushed the engineering much further. The design was fantastically ambitious. Too ambitious for Thomas Telford, who rejected it as technically impossible and chose instead his own design, which didn't span the whole gorge but rather rested on two great towers rising from the riverbed. Mike Rowland, the guide at Clifton, thinks that Bristol's dignitaries were right to overrule Telford.
I dread to think what they would have done to the river traffic, and of course with the tide, when the high tide came in, the ships would undoubtedly have gone into them.
Bristol sacked Telford as judge and held a fresh contest. Brunel submitted 4 designs and went on a charm offensive.
Well, this was his first major project, remember. He was only 23 years at the time when he won the competition. Although he did take the judges of the second competition and harangued them for 2 days, which was quite something for a young 23-year-old who's unknown, to take on the great and the good and say, look, this will work.
Now, I gather this wasn't Brunel's favourite design for this.
No, it said that his favourite design was what he called the Giant's Hole design. Now, the cliffs on this side, you can see there's actually a cave just down there. And the idea was that he would build a tunnel to come out straight onto the bridge, go straight across the gorge, and then into a tunnel on the other side. So he wanted a bridge that would match the drama and the splendour of the gorge.
The great, the good and the thrifty picked Brunel's second best design. Sadly, the bridge wasn't finally completed until after Brunel died, and the men who built it had the temerity to tinker slightly with the original plans. But even so, this is very much Brunel's bridge, and his genius can be seen in every detail. In fact, Brunel never ceases to amaze. 4 years ago, while boring down through the pavement of one tower, construction engineers found to their astonishment that the great supporting pier was hollow.
So Brunel will have to take his top hat off to get through there. Oh, look at this. Baby stalactites. What do these faults do structurally for the bridge then?
Well, this is an abutment, we call it, which is the big square bit, and the Lee Woods Tower, or the Lee Woods Pier, stands on it. Brunel built it to bring the tower out to reduce the length of the central span, and we'd always thought it was solid.
So you didn't know this was here till 4 years ago? 4 years ago. That must have been a big shock to you all.
It was. Golly gosh. Yes,
Is
it
that
really
what
was.
you said?
I think somebody said something like that.
Bristol has long since forgotten the tussles over Brunel's bridge, and tonight thousands of locals have gathered to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the great man's birth by lighting up what he called his little darling. It may not be quite the bridge he had in mind, but still it's a fantastic memorial to his genius.
Amazing! Everyone loves this bridge. Look at the crowds. Everyone worships it. Who cares that it wasn't exactly what Brunel intended? He was a practical man. He knew about adapting to circumstances. He would have gone with the flow. He'd have loved this.
My search for the best of British engineering has brought me to Scotland, and to a bridge whose story begins with a disaster.
On the night of the 28th of December 1879, a force 10 gale devastated the newly opened Tay Bridge. It took a train with 75 people to their graves. The sad irony is, without that disaster, our next icon wouldn't have been built.
When Tay Bridge collapsed, its designer, Thomas Bouch, was working on the foundations of a new rail bridge across the nearby Firth of Forth.
And here are those foundations, only partly finished because Bouch was blamed for the Tay Bridge disaster and was sacked from this project.
Instead, a new design team was hired and given the task of creating a bridge so strong it couldn't possibly fall down.
What was created was the greatest civil engineering project of the 19th century, a marvel of girder and rivet. the fourth rail bridge.
The fourth bridge is impressive enough from a distance, but when you get closer you realise just how staggeringly massive it is. 120 years after its construction, this remains the biggest rail bridge in the world. In its day, it was the biggest structure ever built of steel, an astounding 55,000 tons of the stuff. And it was also the second tallest structure in the world after the Eiffel Tower. I've got a date at the top of this colossus with the president of the Institute of Civil Engineers, Gordon Masterson.
Wow, look at this. Wow, this is wonderful.
Look at that. Isn't it stunning?
You know what I like most is these sturdy railings around the top here. That's what I like to see. That's Edinburgh there, isn't it? That's right. And Arthur's Seat beyond. Okay, a question from the heart now, Gordon. Why is this bridge such an icon? Why is it so important to you?
Well, for me, I'm a local boy, so it's got affectionate memories for me as a youngster. But I think also it's a piece of Scotland's landscape now. We're standing on the top of our particular piece of world, and it's man-made, as opposed to Arthur's Seat. It's just an iconic use of engineering in its best sense, and it serves a useful purpose. It's not just a piece of architecture for tourists.
And an achievement for its time in 1890, is it not?
It really was. I mean, the vision of the engineers that conceived of this bridge and the constructors who built it is really quite awe-inspiring.
Bridges have to be built on rock. To get to the rock, engineers on the fourth bridge had to sink gigantic cylinders 70 feet in diameter through the silt on the riverbed. Once they laid the foundations, the massive superstructure started to go up. It took 4,600 men 7.5 years to fit all the bits together, using no less than 6.5 million rivets. The fourth bridge is so big, there is a legend that by the time they finish painting it, it's time to start painting it again. I decided to see for myself if it's true, and what do you know? The painters are hard at work.
As you can see from the unpainted bit, the steelwork is not in bad shape at all. What you can see peeling off is just the old paint. Because when it's finished, it looked like that over there, that column. Lovely, that beautiful brown colour that makes us think of the fourth rail bridge. In fact, it's that colour is called Fourth Bridge Red. How about that? It's got its own paint code, that colour.
I've been told that painting this bridge costs an eye-watering £10 million a year. So I thought while I was here I'd lend a hand and save a few quid.
Afternoon, Mick. Afternoon. How are you doing? Nice to meet you. Yes, nice to meet you.
But before Mick lets me loose, time to get booted and suited.
Can't breathe and I can't speak. This reminds me of my Star Wars audition.
Then you're ready to go painting it?
Just give me a brush, Mick.
Navigating the fourth bridge is like clambering around the ribs of a metal dinosaur. After a brisk 5-mile hike, I arrive at the coalface, only to find they're painting the thing banana lemon. In fact, it's banana lemon with black spots, just for a change.
It would help if my glasses didn't keep steaming, you think? All this health and safety equipment makes it very, very dangerous. Oops, look at this. Like North Paris, isn't it? Can you guess what it is yet? It's actually the fourth bridge. It doesn't look like it yet.
The fourth bridge was one of the great industrial icons of its age. People who were excited about the modern world loved it. But the romantic, drippy hippie types who painted fairies and wrote sad poems about clouds hated the damn thing.
The art critic William Morris described this bridge as the supremest specimen of all ugliness. But this is a bridge and he's an art critic. What does he know? He should keep his opinions to himself. If he stood here where I'm standing today, he'd just be knocked out by the sheer size of this and the incredible skills those men who built this must have had.
What I really love about this series is how we go and show you something really, really big, like the fourth bridge, and just as you're picking up your jaw from the carpet and wiping your chin dry, we go and show you something really, really, really big. I'm heading 300 miles down the motorway and 100 years later in time to see an engineering leviathan.
Now, I like to say that size isn't everything, but with our next engineering marvel, size most definitely is everything. For 17 years, it was the biggest structure of its kind in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, the Humber Bridge.
This bridge is over 2 kilometers long and is made up of 27,500 tons of steel and 480,000 tons of concrete. The steel cables alone weigh 11,000 tons, and there are enough of them to wrap around the Earth 2.5 times. Opened in 1981, I'm not entirely sure why they built the bridge. Perhaps Yorkshire ran out of women and heard there were some really pretty ones in Lincolnshire.
The big question is, has the bridge made a difference? Well, the ferries used to carry over 90,000 vehicles a year across the river. The bridge carries that many cars in a week. Now, the amazing thing about these towers is they're so high that they're built 3.6 centimetres further apart at the top than at the bottom. And that is to allow for the curvature of the Earth. Amazing. Amazing!
But size brings its problems, as I discovered when I met up with Claire again. We're still talking about suspension bridges.
Don't tell me it's a suspension bridge.
Yeah, it's got all the bits there.
So what happens is you lie down on the chains, I get the whip. And oh, that's a different programme, sorry. Sorry.
Does it look anything like the Humber Bridge?
Well, the thing about a suspension bridge is it's basically a road suspended from cables by other cables, isn't it? And you can see that here, but the Humber Bridge looks absolutely solid. The Humber Bridge doesn't look as if it obeys the same principles as
But it is exactly the same principles, and we've got the uprights and the ground anchors as well.
Okay.
So it's all 4 bits.
So, and we need a carriageway, don't we? Shall I give you a hand with this?
Shall I finish the job off?
Right. I'm glad I'm not going across it.
Well, we'll talk about that.
Have you tested this anywhere else?
Well, I had the dog walking across it.
How heavy is your dog?
It's only a spaniel.
Oh, right. So I'm at least 20 spaniels, I'd imagine. Ah! Sorry, no, go on. I didn't realise you were going to do that. Riveting. How are we doing? Is that enough clanky? Is that enough carriageway?
I think so.
Anchorages.
Now, if it's going to fail, it will fail here.
All right, that so.
All the weight of the bridge has been taken.
I know.
at
At
these
Humber
points.
Bridge, they support 300,000 tons. You know, and I don't weigh that much, but so these support the main chains.
Yeah. The chains carry the
chains
hangers.
go over the towers. The chains carry the hangers, which holds up the
decking.
Is this your first bridge, Claire?
Well, I think we'll talk about that later, Rory. Why don't you try it out first?
All right then. Here goes. We're up. It's tilting rather frighteningly. What are the risks now?
Well, luckily we're not over a ditch, but you could plummet 60 centimetres to the deck.
A lot of what we call wobble, you know, we civil engineers. Oh, I see you're climbing in from the River Humber. Hey, look at this. There you are. We're together on the bridge.
It might be a bit rickety, but Claire's bit of DIY brilliantly illustrates one of the most tricky features of a suspension bridge. It has a rather annoying tendency to wobble. And like an Englishman's beer gut, the bigger it is, the more frightening the wobble.
I think you've done a very good job here.
Well, it's showing all the right principles, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Of course, the threat of wobble at the Humber came not from giant disco dancing TV presenters, it was the wind. The engineering solution was fantastically elegant and clever. The bridge deck is, in effect, a giant aeroplane wing.
This is a very beautiful structure, isn't it? I mean, we're rather privileged here because not many people get this view, do they?
No, down underneath we get a pretty unique view here.
It's amazingly sleek, isn't it?
Yeah, the aerodynamics, of course, is the big thing. The Humber Bridge, when it was first built, that was a unique element. Essentially, it's an upside-down wing. The shape of the deck, the wind travelling over the deck doesn't have to travel as far as under the deck.
So it's slower
so
going
it pulls it down.
That's clever.
stabilises it.
Right.
It pulls it against the hangers. That was one of the unique parts about the Humber Bridge when it was built.
If Tower Bridge is part bridge and part train, then this one is part bridge and part plane. This astonishing place is inside the wing itself, the streamlined hollow bridge deck. It's a surreal 2-kilometre journey worthy of a sci-fi film.
Peter, this is definitely, without doubt, the weirdest place I've ever been. I've been to some weird places.
Yes, I believe.
So where are we now?
Well, we're inside the wing. We're inside the deck of the bridge.
So that sort of, that underside...
That's it, yeah. That aerodynamic profile we're stood on it
we
now.
can hear the traffic above us.
There is roadway there, 13 millimetres of steel above our heads, and about 9 millimetres of steel below our feet before the Humber estuary.
So we got 9 millimetres.
And it's nice and
steel.
solid.
Don't do that.
We'll stand up here.
So we got 9 millimetres. That's less than a centimetre.
It is,
keeping us out of the river.
Yes.
How lovely. That's a great thought. And we talked earlier about the movement of the bridge in the wind. Presumably the metal expands and contracts with the temperature going up and down.
There is, yes. I think one of the most striking, perhaps, figures on that is the fact that the main cables themselves, with every 1 degree rise in temperature, they expand such that the deck sinks by 150 millimetres.
So the bridge is shorter in winter, longer in summer?
It is, yep. And during the day it will expand.
But for the full shock and awe of the Humber Bridge, there's nothing for it. I'm going to have to climb 155 metres to the top of one of its massive supporting towers.
Whoa! I say, it's a bit high up here and scary. It's like being on top of the Humber Bridge. Fantastic view. See my house from here? Definitely. You see Peter Crouch over there in Liverpool. This is quite stunning. That is the only time I'm going to do that, okay? I hope you got that shot. Right. Right, I'm going downstairs now to use the lavatory.
Look at that nutcase, he must be crazy. That's one thing I'm definitely never going to do. That and getting off with Jennifer Lopez. That nutcase, it turns out, is John Williams, who's in charge of bridge maintenance.
John, that was very, very impressive.
Nice to meet you.
It's very scary watching you do
Welcome
that.
to the top of the bridge.
All my worst dreams are about being on high buildings. You obviously don't get dreams like that.
No, that's not the type of dreams I have.
Right now, you have to inspect all these cables, so you actually abseil down them.
I abseil the tower, the 4 tower legs, as it were, the concrete elements. Then occasionally we actually go down the hangers as well. That's the suspension cables that the decks held off.
A lot of cable here.
There is a lot of cable, yeah. I'll show you where the cables end up, and then you'll get a bit more appreciation of what the cables are actually.
As long as I don't have to walk out on there with you, I'm not doing that.
I'll hold your hand.
Where the cables end up, as John rather quaintly describes it, is another amazing bit of the Humber Bridge you never normally get to see. The only reason the massive towers don't get pulled together by the weight of the bridge is that there are cables holding them apart. And those cables are anchored securely into the ground on either side of the river. And when I say anchored securely, I'm not kidding.
This is what we call the anchorage block, and it's doing exactly what it says. Here we've got the 5mm cables banded together, anchored at the bottom here, and they're anchored to 190,000 tonnes of concrete. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
So it goes way down.
Goes way, way down. You can see that is ground level. Below that there's another 41 metres of solid concrete.
And that's holding the bridge up, and the bridge is held up by 5mm steel cables. That's amazing, isn't it?
That's right, the whole bridge is suspended off these cables, yes. So they're very important.
It's an impressive piece of work. When you're here, you realise the simplicity of a suspension bridge structure, don't you? Because this is a big cable, anchored very well, so you can hang a roadway.
And just hang the roadway off the suspender cables, exactly. So very simple, on a large scale, but very, very effective.
Simple, but complicated. I think what I love about this bridge is its simplicity in a way. It is pure engineering. There are no architectural frills or extras. This is an engineer's bridge. You can see what it does. It is what it does. It's functional. Does that make sense? The big shame for me is, of course, that the water isn't blue. It would be so lovely to be stood up here looking down at aquamarine blue sea, but unfortunately it's a sea of instant coffee.
The Humber Bridge has taken my breath away. It's truly awe-inspiring. I think even Brunel would have been rather impressed. In fact, it makes you proud to think that the bold pioneering spirit of Derby, Telford and Brunel is alive and kicking. But which of the magnificent bridges I've seen on my journey is the best? It's an impossible task. Balance a pint of beer, flirt with a pretty engineer, and at the same time choose the best bridge in Britain. In this film, we've been able to feature just a few. The magical, ingenious Tower Bridge.
Look at this!
The elegant Iron Bridge, the first ever bridge to be made of cast iron. Telford's revolutionary Menai Straits Bridge. Or Brunel's heavenly suspension bridge at Clifton.
Amazing!
The gigantic steel rail bridge across the Firth of Forth.
The phrase "don't look down" springs to mind.
And the even more gigantic Humber Bridge, until recently the biggest in the world.
It's like being on top of the Humber Bridge. Let's talk about the Tower Bridge. Very special.
Special is the word. It's awful.
You don't like it?
Absolutely awful. It's a travesty of engineering. But it's just so over the top. It's over-engineered. It's silly.
But you think of when it dates, because it's got all that sort of false granite, those towers. You don't
It's
like
so showy. That's my problem.
But it's a symbol of London. It's got to be showy. They don't want naked engineering there, and it's practical. It opens up to let ships go through.
Okay. But a more elegant solution to crossing from A to B has got to be Iron Bridge. Very, very simple.
Cast iron arch.
Nothing showy about that.
Well, you say there's nothing showy about it, but the whole thing was in fact an advert for Abraham Darby's steel company, wasn't it?
And it worked.
It worked.
And it still works to this day.
Made by me. It looks in fact it's too under-engineered Iron Bridge, isn't it? It's just too naked. It looks like a cast iron arch.
That's what it is.
But if you're talking about elegance, we've got suspension bridges. We've got Humber, we've got Menai and Clifton.
I like the confidence of the Humber Bridge, because when it was built, it's the longest span anywhere in the world, wasn't it?
17 years, I'm given to understand.
I mean, that's quite a record, and that's, staking your professional reputation on building that. You've got to have some confidence.
It's one of the things, like, it's elegance, it's simplicity. I mean, it looks like a bridge. I mean, there's nothing.
So how can you like that and Tower Bridge at the same time?
And look, Tower Bridge, it has to split to let ships through.
Forth Bridge.
If you're talking over-engineering, Forth Bridge, it's a lot of metal, isn't it?
Yeah, but it had to look strong after the Tay Bridge disaster.
It doesn't move, unlike the Humber Bridge, which is swinging around in the wind all the time. No, I'm afraid I'm going to go with Humber Bridge.
Iron Bridge for me.
Okay. Claire, we've built bridges between each other, haven't we, in this programme?
You're going to make me cry in a minute, Rory.
Goodbye.